Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle, and today we're privileged to have with us Scott Gerber, who is the CEO of The Community Company and also co-author of Superconnector, Stop Networking and Start Building Business Relationships That Matter. Scott, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, so I'm certain that people can read through your bio, and we don't need to go back to, what you did in college and what led you to this point in your career, but you have such the storied past with building these communities, from the Forbes councils to everything in between, and I just love what you do, and I love this concept of the book, so that's what I want to focus on. But give us a little bit of a brief background and what led you to then to co-author this book now in this day and time, given all of the digital that we're dealing with.
Well, it sounds funny. I think you just answered the question in a sort of way.
Yeah. Okay, well, have a nice day. Drop the mic, and we're done.
Well, it's funny. In everybody always has some way of basically saying that the landscape has changed. When the reality is that it shouldn't. Just because there's a new technology, a new platform, like you said, digital. I've heard people say in the real world versus the online one. Shouldn't humans just be human all the time? And that is sort of our premise. It's this idea that this, networking, and I say that with air quotes condescendingly, this idea of networking has become just like every other marketing platform, if you will. It started with good intentions, decades ago, and now it's been bastardized and demolished into a personal brand, icky feel, out for oneself, transactional mindset. And so what we said is, look, we've built these incredible communities over the years, my partner and I, because we've basically went back to our human instincts, the idea of empathy and being curious about people and starting meaningful conversations and being emotionally intelligent about how we interact with one another, and just had this great mindset that we believe is a framework for success instead of the same old stuff. And so I think what we wanted to do now, because of all this bastardization, because of people looking at vanity metrics and, platforms over conversation, even though now the platforms are seeing how messed up they are and they're heading back to that direction, we wanted to let people know there is a better way that's working that is better than the antiquated social norms, because the social norms are wrong, and we have proof.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. And, it's kind of like this, given the digital world we live in, and given back in the old days, you would do some direct mail campaigns that, and then now that doesn't work because of digital. Well, I would contend and say that maybe direct mail type campaigns, if done right, has a place today even more than ever, given the fact that you will stand out and people are so used to reading this tweet, liking this, retweeting this, sharing this online. And when you can then go back and reconnect in that personal touch, it really does make you stand out, because their other colleagues just, retweeted something they did, but you left someone a voicemail that thanked them for something that they did. And I would even say that there's a wonderful opportunity to mix the two. So, for instance, if you follow someone, influencer, strategic, alliance, client, it doesn't matter, and you saw that they posted up this article, you can like that. Yeah, you can make a comment. But what if you picked up this thing called a telephone and called them up, and maybe you don't get them because they're busy, but you leave them a voicemail and go, hey, this is Mike. Hey, I just wanted to thank you for that article you did on LinkedIn because I read it, and that part you said this, it was really critical. So, hey, awesome. Thank you so much. Hey, we need to catch up soon. Doesn't that give that person that kind of warm and fuzzy that, man, he took the time to actually physically call me. He noticed something on social media, digital, but then doesn't that kind of build that social capital and build that relationship?
Well, I think that's one example. There are many others, but I think it comes back to the core, right? It's someone taking time to be their best self, and to not be transactional, thinking, I'm going to call you to do hey, you're so great and awesome. By the way, I want to sell you something, right? Yeah. I think that is the instinct today. And, in the book, we talk a lot about somehow the different ways that connectors use technology to, express and amplify their own humanity. So here's an example.
Yeah.
There's one connector in the book named Jason Gagnard, who, when he makes introductions, he refuses to do the introductions via email, via writing something, because he wants these introductions, which he takes great pride in, to resonate. And so when two amazing people are in his crosshairs and he just has to introduce them, he sits down and basically does a 1 to 2 minute video just for those two people that goes into deep understanding of the why he thinks that two parties should connect, a little bit about each of them, some synergies and so forth. But the idea that you're getting this very personal video, which one is for an audience of two. Two, you can see his context, his passion. He can't be misunderstood like you can in a text message or an email. Like, it's very clear. And the fact that he took the time just shows the care and the thoughtfulness. These are just some of the ways in which people that truly are thoughtful connectors are better, creating value for one another, for other people. Another great example. There's a lot of folks, myself included, that after every conversation we have that are, great conversations, we quickly have some sort of system. In my case, it's very simple. I go into my, my contacts app on my iPhone, I go into the notes section, type 3 or 4 different things I learned in the conversation, something that was based on the situation, like where were we, how we found ourselves there, did people introduce us, what did we talk about, and what's a unique thing that is about that person. And so next time when I see this person, I have a natural jumping off point of where I can start that conversation. Hey, Sam, last time we spoke, you told me that you were dealing with that issue in your company. How'd that work out? You still need some help there. Can I introduce you to someone that might be able to solve that issue if you haven't? So the key is that you're creating these moments, but you're extracting context and creating, as I call, like the Sherlock Holmes of discourse, in the way in which you are pulling all these amazing insights and context from conversations, situational awareness, and just all these environmental factors that make you a great connector. And you can have these one-on-one, very individualized approaches to relationships because you're being smart about how you're building the foundation for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's huge. And you know what? You said the word, or you described a process. And it really is something that should be a process, which should be a habit, and it should be simple and easy, like you just described, like grabbing your phone and put it in the notes. Because if it's hard, then you're not going to do it. But that's just so excellent. And I know that you say and teach and speak about why networking is dead and super connection should replace it. So let's define what is a super connection so that someone can learn how to be a super connector.
Yep, absolutely. So, I think of it this way, right? When you think of like a networker, I hate to say that with such disdain because I hate the term, but you think of it as a tactic, right? 5 tips to network, like that kind of like transactional, out for yourself, goal-oriented marketing tactic. That's what that says to me. What connection is it's this idea of building thoughtful, deep, meaningful relationships with small inner circles of people that you go really deep with, that you're investing true time and real time with, and that you're not looking at a one-to-one transactional value proposition. Instead, you're looking at habitually being generous to a group of amazing people because amazing people want to help other amazing people. And over time, just by that habitual generosity and not thinking so myopic and not thinking so short-term, but more long-term and value prop-oriented for everybody's benefit, you ultimately are creating a community where you're the sphere of influence and ultimately able to create a circle of value. That will, of course, at some point pay you back in dividends, but it's because you're looking at it from the whole community perspective and not, well, I did something for John, now John's got to do something for me. So I think these are just very thoughtful individuals who have a foundational understanding of the psychology of relationship building. And they're empathetic, they are curious, they're emotionally intelligent, and they're very self-aware individuals who just aren't in this for some tactic or tip. In fact, I've been saying a lot recently, the best way to describe the two sort of pillars of networking versus connectors, so these are not seen as semantic differences, but true different pillars, is that you talk about networking in the tactics and tip sense. You talk about the connector attitude in a mindset and framework sense. Right? You're not going to go and lose 100 pounds and live a healthy lifestyle because you went on a 30-day cleanse and then you, for the rest of your life, eat whatever you want. You're changing your lifestyle to live your healthier, best self. It's the same thing with how you build relationships. You can't have a short-term approach to see long-term value creation. It makes no sense. And so that's what I think the major differentiator is, and that's where I think the win is. These community builders see the world very differently.
And they approach it from the position of giving, serving, and all of those cliche words. But I think the biggest thing that has to be there first as a foundation is, yes, it could come back to you down the road, but you're doing this not for that. I mean, it's like the old movies when you would see the bellhops bring the suitcases up to the room. They stand there with their hand out because they knew, I brought the suitcases for you. You're going to give me a tip. Well, we cannot let ourselves think, I'm going to introduce you to someone. Where's my introduction in return? It's been 2 whole hours or 2 whole days. So I think that's a struggle, right? Do you ever find working with people that they agree with the philosophy of giving and connecting, but they struggle with, but how long do I do it before? I mean, I got other things that I've got to do than connect people, and I got to put food on the table and increase sales. So where does that kind of struggle get fixed?
It's an excellent question. I think a key trait, or I should say skill set, of Superconnectors they are incredibly efficient time management experts.
Yeah.
I mean, they look at productivity as the number one value because you can't recreate time. It is the one asset, as we all know, we can't reinvest to get more of. And so really what they look at is a couple different things within the framework here. First and foremost, they are experts in saying no. And that sounds so counterintuitive. Wait a minute, you're telling me to be a connector, but you're telling me to say no to people? Shouldn't I be habitually generous to everyone? And the answer is no. There are certain times where you must protect your time, because if you are not successful, those that you're trying to help cannot be successful, nor would they want to connect with you if you weren't successful. And so you have to protect your time. That's number one. 2, in addition to being time efficiency experts, they are also unbelievably selective. And not selective in the elitist sense, but selective in once they've matured their overall network, really figuring out who are they going to dive deep with. Who is always going to get that phone call no matter what time of day it is or where you are in the world, right? And so your inner circle, counterintuitively, should not be this big group of network. Your network is your network mentality. It should be a very small, very tight group where everyone is invested very heavily. And so that way, when people make introductions or when you are going to help certain other folks, you're helping that core group, which also has other inner circles that they've developed, because amazing people attract amazing people. So the idea is if you have the right core inner circle, the right anchors around you, you'll be able to also be directly or indirectly connected to their inner circles. And so these tight pods, that's number 2. And then number 3, the reality is that you have to be good at saying, all right, this is the area that I can be very helpful in, and everything else to me is noise. These are the times I'm going to dedicate to this activity. Whether, in the book we talked about Adam Rifkin, who basically has a company called 106 Miles. It's an events program on the West Coast. And he has something called the 5-minute favor, where he wants to give a series of 5-minute favors that have maximum impact for the other person, but are manageable time slots for him. And so it's this idea that he has dedicated a series of time in his day or his week to these 5-minute favors. But that's his gift. But he does it methodically. And so that's how you have to think about doing this. It is not a free-for-all, whenever, wherever, drop what you're doing and help everyone in the world. It's a series of methodical steps you're going to take in a framework you've created for yourself to help those that ultimately could benefit most from your inner circle or from the inner circles that they're connected to. That's how connectors look at the world. I fundamentally believe, and I think Adam Grant talks about this pretty well in his book, Give and Take, which is there's a pyramid, and givers are both the most successful people in the pyramid and the least successful people in the pyramid. And the reason being is they don't know where the boundaries are between the two when you're on the lower end of that pyramid. So if you want to avoid the lower end of that pyramid, you have to set boundaries, you have to prioritize your success, and you have to find smart ways to find times in your day to give back with maximum habitual generosity, but to the kinds of people that will be able to utilize that habitual generosity for better gain.
And habitual generosity, I think, is such a unique word. It just jumps out. And I know that in your book you talk about giftology, that book and the concept behind it that John Ruhlin talked about. And so now we have gifting, giving, habitual generosity. It's not just a one-time thing. And that creates just, this feeling with someone, people want to be felt appreciated. And I think that gets to be where, it's more powerful to give than to receive. And I think that all ties in together, right? Because now that can create that and cultivate really that network and that community feel, because it's kind of like putting fertilizer in the ground. You're cultivating something positive so that when the seed comes in, then it can grow as big and full as possible. So what would you say is a good tip to make sure that you are approaching generosity and giving and creating remarkable experiences with consistency?
Yeah, I think that you have to really find smart ways to take your strengths and turn them into experiential opportunities. And so, for example, obviously there's two kinds of people, introverts and extroverts. And there's this, I think, really big misconception that introverts, by definition, shouldn't be good connectors. My argument as an extrovert is that they're actually more primed to be better superconnectors than extroverts. And the reason is because they are thoughtful in the research they put into the people they want to connect, the curation into the intimate settings because they can't handle bigger rooms and bigger environments. Personally, it gives, like my partner as an example, being an introvert, gives him hives. He can't handle it. But it allows you to be more thoughtful around curation, and it allows you to put yourself in the center of influence in something that you can create, like a smaller get-together, a coffee one-on-one, a small group drinks, in a mastermind setting, whatever the case may be. And so I think first and foremost, you got to find what your experience is. We have some folks that do, a specific kind of event, like a wine tasting event for high-end wines. For one of the connectors we talked about, that's a wealth manager in the book. We have others that are doing, much larger scale events. But basically it's they attend those events with the goal of finding, almost as a talent scout, the people that they feel would be better in a smaller room, and then pulling those folks into what they would think of as like an oasis, off-site, off-conference, to better interconnect the key people of the larger population together. So you got to find your space. I don't think it's as simple as saying, hey, every Tuesday I'm going to do this event. I don't think it works that way. But I think it's finding that oasis for yourself. It's how do you best connect? Is it a Facebook group? If you can't possibly stomach being in the middle of a big room in person, can you be a digital community manager of a core topic or subject matter expertise or geographic business type or whatever the case may be? Bring those folks into a setting that it's a community on whatever platform, but that is very thoughtfully curated, thoughtfully managed, not allowed for advertorial or promotion, a safe space. So you got to find what's best for you, figure out that real estate that you can package, and then ultimately that becomes the container that you as the connector will constantly rely on as your key way of curating or convening the right people around you.
Yeah, and I think that if you have it as a recurring event every Tuesday, then you're going to approach it as just a check off the box. It's got to be part of your mindset and mentality. And it's almost like that little game that my kids played when they were little, the matching game, and you turn over the little square and you try to find the match and remember where it was. Well, if we're talking to people and interacting and we're listening for clues of what they're good at or what they need, and then the next person we're listening to, in our network, who can we connect them with? And then now that gets back to the idea you mentioned where that one person does the short video and how are you going to connect them up? But you're always watching for that to be that connector, and it's not just that task that you did last Tuesday. So I think that's a really big thing as well. And once you kind of, don't you feel, or have you found this in your past, where once people start doing this and then they start getting that positive feedback, hey, thank you so much for that. It really meant a lot, even if it's not transactional or business, referral, if it's just a sincere thank you, that kind of spurs you on to keep doing it because you know that it's making that positive impact just on that first level, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, a lot of the connectors that we talked to in the book, and I think myself and Ryan will be included in this, we just get off on doing this. We love doing this. Like, we love helping great people succeed. And so that feeling of I've made impact it's just like a drug in some ways, right? It's one of the things that I hate to say you want the high, but you get my point. Like, it's one of those things that is how we're built. And some people are going to understand that and some people aren't. And my advice to those that don't really feel that way you have to really assess yourself to determine, can you be a connector? I do believe this is a series of learnable skill sets, but you also have to innately care about people. right? I've met a lot of people that say, oh, I love connecting, I love networking, but then will tell me about all these horrible conversations they've had, right? And it's just like, well, you can't dislike people but want to be a connector. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So I think you got to be really, really truthful, really self-aware, audit the way you think, because if you're not seeing the value of what you're doing for other people, then you really need to either change your mindset, which is what we hope you do, or at least be okay with the idea that, this isn't for you. And hopefully whatever you do works for you because, I've met people that, for example, are fine to, meet 100 people and piss off 99 of them, but they make the sale with one. And that's how they live their lives. And while I think that is a fundamentally flawed premise, I guess that works for some people. I would argue that that'll come back tenfold in a very negative way later on. So audit yourself. Be self-aware about what you are, how you act, and most importantly, how you communicate, how you offer and deliver value. And you'll be so surprised, like that first time you've really made impact, what that should do to you. It should make you really be excited.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. And I know that you say you got to almost have that systematic approach and that consistent approach. And you say asking, how can I help you is the worst question. So absolutely. I know that back in the referral days and the networking days, that's what you're trained to say. When I'm talking to people in my network, what's a good way that I can introduce you? What's a better way to approach that?
Well, first, let's figure out why it's a terrible question, right? Like if you've done your job, if you've been excellent conversation, even in 5 minutes, right? If you're asking great questions versus surface level, you should know enough at a high level to be able to see if there is value you can offer or not. So what says to someone, I've not been listening to you at all, and I don't really care then, hey, you just told me all these things for 5 minutes, but how can I help you? Meaning like there's no thought in that. Shouldn't you be able to just tell me what value you can offer? You know what I mean? Like it's such a social script at this point versus somebody said something, you then say, hey, what's the biggest challenge that you're facing in that right now? Oh, what's causing that challenge? Is it a person or a thing? And all of a sudden, with a bunch of series of questions, you should be able to say, I know John, this guy that owns this business, but it seems like he went through something similar. Do you want me to check in with him and see if it seems similar enough where he would be happy to jump on a phone and tell you what he did to get through this? Like, that's help. The how can I help you question is a thoughtless social script. That's just like, okay, if I say this, that means you're then going to offer me the same response, and now I'm going to do my true purpose, which is get something out of you.
Yeah.
So that's why it's a terrible question. So the good things, the good questions are, again, things that get people talking and get them to understand that you really do have good intent without saying in the end something that ultimately seems that transactional mindset, right? So it's not about saying at the end of something, how can I help you type finisher. Not every single conversation should end in some sort of result, right, for you. In fact, most shouldn't, if any. You should be delivering less in what ultimately is what I want than the other person. It should be like a 75-25 equation. You're talking 25, they're talking 75%. So I would just ask, like, if you invest smarter and think longer term, then you're going to, at the end of the day, get to be in a better place. That being said, it doesn't mean that you can't profit from being a connector. I love when people say, well, this hippy-dippy stuff sounds nice, but like you said, somebody's got to pay the bills. And the argument is yes, but it's to me, like, what sounds stupider in a way? Spending time and really getting to know someone and then ultimately, finding a way that asks them the right ask at the right time when it's meaningful and impactful, or the first time you meet someone, asking them for the number one thing that they could ever possibly give you. What's going to be dumber? You know what I mean? Like, which one of those is not going to work out better? So I think that we have to just be smart about it. I mean, I often ask people this question, which is, especially to marketers. I've heard a lot of marketers talk about how, like, this is how you do this one tip to get a better conversion. Right? This is how you do this one thing better, and you're going to see these results. And then if you ask them, hey, so when people do that to you, do you open the email or do you convert? And they'll say, no, of course not. I know it's which is crazy. So you're basically advocating something you yourself would never do. So how is that any different if you put it in a relationship context? You meet someone for the first time and you're the CEO of a company, and they say, hey, I'd really love to get your business. I just met you 5 minutes ago. Who the hell are you? But that's the crazy of the networking mentality. But that's how we've been trained to think this works. Real relationships take real time, and you can't cheat real time. Fact. If you think you can cheat real time, then you're going to have a real big swift kick in the ass over time. And that's the difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's just profound. I mean, there's so many things that we could go deeper just on that comment alone, but it does take time, and it's real relationships. And to your point there, I love that. How would you respond to this? And all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, I guess I wouldn't like it. Like the sales manager that trains his team on cold calling. Well, do you cold call? No, of course not. Well, you've got to have that belief there, and people can smell on your approach whether you are truly believing in this or you're just doing it to check off a box. And I think that's really huge. You talk about a Superconnector having systems and things like that. What are some behind the curtain systems, as you say, of what the Superconnectors don't? They might say at the first level, well, hey, I do this and this and this with my approach to Superconnector. But what are some of the real brass tacks, getting down to some of the things that they really do that make some great impact?
Yep. Again, like I said earlier, that we don't think in terms of tips and tactics. We think in terms of frameworks. And so,
yes.
A connector doesn't want to change how they're having conversations or how they're being selective or, those kinds of things. They want to have, as I said earlier, the technology amplify their humanity or cheat the brain to allow them to be human, meaning how do you hold all this information because the human brain is incapable of doing so at a certain level of scale. But that doesn't mean you don't want to remember key insights you learn about people to better help them longer term. And so, for example, in the book, we talk about who, again, and I say this to your audience, this is an example. This is not what you should necessarily do. None of these are do this and you'll be successful, but it's the idea of giving you ideas based on what works for other connectors. But he has developed a robust grading system and matrix on a spreadsheet that must be 1.5 miles long at this point that he can easily search in a variety of different criteria. And what he does is as he meets people, he grades them on sort of different levels of, the value they can offer others, their industries, all kinds of things, and then puts key insights and contextual analysis into these spreadsheets as well. So as he meets people, if someone says, X, Y, Z, and they're looking for this kind of help, he has a quick cheat sheet online that he's very up to date, where he can easily see, does he have someone on the fly that makes sense that whether he tells that person in the meeting he's in or not, at that moment, he knows he's got potentially someone that can deliver the value. And so it's these systems that help us to cheat what we are incapable as humans of doing, but it often helps us to deliver a more human touch. The same thing goes for, say, follow-up software like Boomerang or Follow-up CC. Like, I want to know if I make an introduction, I want to know 2 weeks later, how did I do? So I want to make sure that I'm going to follow up with those parties. I'm reminded to do so. I can't possibly remember every reminder I want to do, but this helps me do it. It sounds so simple, but it's a key insight. They also, in addition to the tech that allows me to do it, I've set up a rigorous framework of how am I going to help people in the future based on introductions I make. So first I'm going to assess, was my introduction on par to make sure I'm still, good at what I do, right? To make sure that I can assess myself and tweak or know where I missed the mark. So that next time I don't make similar mistakes if I've made any. If I made a great connection, then I want to know how it went. And in a way, I want to know that people saw value and that they connected. And then if I lastly find out that someone that I connected someone else to has been unresponsive or was rude or whatever, that's also going to help me assess who the people are that I've connected as people and how willing am I going to be in the future to assist either the asker or the person that was helping the asker. So again, all these different systems, they become second nature, but the technology systems behind the scenes are the things that help you actually stand it up. And so that's the key of what I and a lot of connectors like myself do.
Yeah, I love it, and you made even a passing point there of, make a connection, but then assess it, reassess it, and don't make it to be the only one, because then that person or the 2 or 3 you connected up might feel like, well, that was just a drive-by connection, but yet if a week or 2 or 4 weeks later you come back to them and go, hey, you know what? I was thinking about that introduction. I found someone else that works at this company. the point is, you can't just do a one pass and think that people will appreciate that, to the end of time. It's got to be something that is ongoing, because to your point, it's that tight group, that small group. If you're trying to connect with thousands of people, you might only be able to send them a connection or think of them in a very long periods of time in between. Is that a good assessment as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, I just think at the end of the day, smarter systems you can create to help you keep on top of your network, but amplify your own humanity, the better you'll be.
Yeah. Enough said. That's just awesome. I've just loved talking to you. So thank you so much for your time. Let's tell people where they can reach out to you to get your new book, Superconnector.
Absolutely. Well, you can buy the book anywhere books are sold, stores and online, and check out superconnectorbook.com. You can also follow me and my co-author partner on Twitter. Mine is @ScottGerber, ScottGerber, and he's @RyanPaugh, RyanPaugh. And love to keep the conversation going online in a very human way.
Perfect. Well, Scott, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.